You ever just stare at your game shelf and realize half of your favorite JRPG series just stopped existing? There's nothing but silence. I'll be digging through my old stuff and suddenly spot Breathfire 3 or Shadow Hearts, and this wave of nostalgia hits me. But then it's always followed by that burning question I hate asking. Why didn't this continue? So today I want to talk about those games. The games that I grew up with, and maybe ones that you've grown up with as well. The ones that shaped how you and I view the genre, and the ones that have undeservingly vanished without a trace for no good reason. This might hit you personally, or it might make you remember a long lost series that you didn't realize you missed so much. Also, just as a precursor for this video, we will be talking about franchises with no new entry. Remasters and remakes do not count for today's video. With that being said, let's get into it and talk about 10 JRPG franchises that have been completely forgotten but deserve to come back. Shadow Hearts was one of those series that still haunts me to this day, and I don't just mean the monsters or the setting of it, it's the feeling it leaves you with, even years later. This was a series that didn't just tell weird dark stories, it kinda made you uncomfortable, made you think, and then it just kinda disappeared with no trace. The first game came out in 2001. It was a direct sequel to the PlayStation classic Kodelka, but Shadow Hearts was something else entirely. Set in an alternate history version of the early 1900s, it blended real-world events with weird supernatural horror. You got to fight demons and travel through a cursed version of our own world, uncovering tragedy and trauma with a turn-based battle system. Speaking of which, that battle system with the Judgment Ring system, still one of the most satisfying risk-reward mechanics in any JRPG I've played. It forced you to engage, take risks, and not just sit back and button mash. You had to focus, line up that perfect hit, or suffer the consequences if you didn't hit it just right. But what made Shadow Hearts so unforgettable was its tone. It was dark and it was hopeless. Bizarre, but never random. One moment, you'll be facing grotesque body horror, and the next, you'd be laughing at a luchador vampire named Joachim. It shouldn't have worked, but it did, and honestly, it kind of stuck with people. Shadow Hearts had 3 main entries: Shadow Hearts, Covenant, and From the New World. Covenant in particular is often considered the best, a strange but beautiful balance of horror, heartbreak, and humor. But by 2005, the series was already slipping into obscurity. By 2007, the developer Saknoth, which had rebranded to Nautilus, was effectively dissolved. There's no revival, there's no remaster, there's not even a digital re-release. The series is just gone. And that hurts, because this series meant something to a lot of us. It wasn't polished like Final Fantasy, or loud like Kingdom Hearts. But it had heart. Raw, bleeding, vulnerable heart. You felt almost as if you were playing someone's very personal and very strange dream. Now there is a spiritual successor in the works called Pennyblood, made by some of the original team, and while that's exciting, I hope it captures even a fraction of what made Shadow Hearts so unique. And more importantly, I kinda hope it actually gets a release. It's not looking good. Seriously, I'm worried. But honestly, I'd still love to see a proper return. Whether it's a remake, a remaster, or a full-on sequel. I know this video is focusing on new entries of these long-lost series, but at this point, I'd honestly love anything from the Shadow Hearts franchise. Tales of Eternia was the first game I played, and it was love at first sight. I didn't know at the time, but this was going to become one of my favorite franchises of all time. The battles and the music were what drew me in. Real-time action and great music that stood out compared to everything else I played. The characters were different from other JRPGs. They constantly argued. They made terrible jokes, comforted each other in the dark moments. They felt kind of like some sort of dysfunctional family. It was actually kind of realistic. It was a nice change of pace from what I was used to when it came to JRPGs. And for years, Tales kept on delivering that magic. Tales of Destiny, Tales of the Abyss, Tales of Vesperia, Tales of Grace's F. Every few years, there was another one. And once a game got released, another one was already teased, be it a mainline or a spin-off. We had a non-stop stream of Tales games, and it was a great time to be a Tales fan. But lately, it feels like that spark is fading, and it leaves me wondering if the dream had died. Contrary to what Tales of Fantasia's lead song led me to believe. Tales of Arise came out in 2021. It looked great, it played amazingly, and it was clearly a big step forward for the series, but while I loved it for what it is, and I know I'm not alone in this, it was an amazing game in its own right, but it didn't exactly feel like Tales. The party dynamic felt kind of stiff. The skits were lifeless without the humor the franchise is known for. The post-battle banter was gone. Combat had completely abandoned the linear motion battle system, however that had been disappearing for several games at this point, and Arise turned into a generic fast-paced combat similar to Star Ocean, and it kind of left me wondering, what the heck just happened? And now 4 years later, there's nothing. No news, no teaser, no hint of what's next. Just remaster after remaster. There's Symphonia, Graces we got earlier this year, and there's a new unannounced remaster on the way. I kind of hope it's Rebirth. But no new story, no new cast to care about, and honestly, I'm kind of starting to worry. For a series that used to release games one after another on the regular, this silence feels heavy. It's not like they've said, we're done, but going this long with no new game makes me wonder if Tales is quietly being shelved. It's almost as if Bandai Namco is hoping we'll slowly forget that this series exists. And that kind of breaks my heart a little, because Tales was never about being the biggest or most groundbreaking. You knew you were getting a fun, simple, anime action RPG that could give you that feeling of warmth. Even if that feeling has vanished from more recent games like Zestiria, Berseria, and Arise, a new entry is still one of those things I always hope we hear about every time there's some sort of gaming event. I don't need it to go backward. I'm not asking for another Tales of Eternia or Tales of the Abyss, though I wouldn't complain if they got remastered. I just want a new game in the franchise. Sure, I feel like Tales isn't exactly what it was, but I still really enjoy the series for what it is. Well, except for Zestiria, let's just pretend that game doesn't exist. And while we talk about it, I am currently playing through Tales of Rebirth, and I am reviewing every Tales game in the franchise. So if that's something that you think you'd be interested in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of my future Tales reviews. I don't know really if Star Ocean is dead, but it kind of feels like it's been missing for a long time. Star Ocean was a series that always felt different to me. Generally, Star Ocean is a sci-fi JRPG, with all the space travel and futuristic appeal, but at the same time, it had the essence of high fantasy and medieval. This made it feel super unique. I've always loved the series, Second Story especially. That one is among one of my favorite games of all time. Speaking of which, play the remake. That was one of the best games of 2023. Though with that being said, I feel like we haven't seen much of Star Ocean at all in recent years. But the thing is, this isn't exactly uncommon. Being a Star Ocean fan means waiting, and waiting, and waiting some more. After The Last Hope in 2009, we didn't get another mainline game until 2016, and we all know how people felt about Star Ocean 5 Integrity and Faithlessness. Then, we had another 6-year gap before The Divine Force came out in 2022. And now, we're right back in that quiet place again. Don't tell me I have to wait until 2028 for another Star Ocean. I'm not sure if my heart can handle that. There's absolutely no news. There's no teaser, not even a hint of what's next. That is, if the series is even still alive. It's exhausting, because every time there's a new Star Ocean game, I always think, maybe this is it. Maybe now the series is back on track. Are we going to get something to shelve Star Ocean 2 as the best game in the series? But then it just kind of comes and goes. The silence begins again. There's no follow-up, no momentum, just a long pause that stretches into years. It doesn't even feel like Square Enix knows what to do with Star Ocean. Divine Force kind of dropped and then it was gone. It came out, some of us played it, and then the conversation just vanished. There was no DLC. There was no post-launch support. There was no sign of a future. It's like they released it and then immediately moved on. To be fair, it did come out at that point where Square Enix was rapid firing out games month after month. I remember that time vividly. We were getting games month after month. We got Star Ocean 6, The Divine Force, Valkyrie Elysium, the Diofield Chronicle, various Daylife, back to back to back to back. It's no surprise that Divine Force didn't get more support than it should have because there was just too many games all out at once. So I feel even if there wasn't anything else to distract you from it, Star Ocean 6 still would have vanished suddenly. It's painful every time this happens, because even when the games are flawed, and they often are, Star Ocean always had something cool going for it to make it feel unique. The battle systems, the item creation, the monster designs. It's still got so much potential, but it just never gets the support or consistency it needs to really thrive and become a heavy hitter. Right now, it feels like the series is just drifting amongst the stars. It's not cancelled, it's not officially gone, just floating out there, waiting for a new game to finally get its grip on the JRPG genre all over again. I don't want to give up on the franchise of Star Ocean. It's up there with Tales as one of my favorite series of all time, and it would hurt me personally if the series just disappeared. I've talked about it time and time again. I absolutely love Dragon Quest, and it's my very favorite turn-based JRPG series. I remember playing it at 3 years old with my babysitter. I didn't know what it was, I just liked the music, the sound effects, and the colorful monsters. I was a young child. I didn't know what was going on, but I like to think that that was the moment I got hooked on the series. It feels weird to talk about Dragon Quest in a video like this because technically, it's not really a forgotten series. It's one of the biggest JRPG franchises ever, and it helped build the entire genre. In Japan, it's a national institution. It is the main reason, specifically Dragon Quest III, that you are not allowed to release a Dragon Quest game in the middle of the week. Here in the West, though, it still kind of feels like something you have to seek out to love. And right now, it feels like it's just sitting again, waiting for the next release. Dragon Quest XI was the last mainline game, and it was beautiful. In fact, I want to blame that game for making the series popular. It was a classic in all the best ways. The music, the characters, the sense of scale and adventure. It feels like JRPG comfort food. It's almost like coming home after a long day at work. But that was 2017 in Japan, 2018 for most of us. And yeah, we got the definitive edition later with all the extra features like the 2D mode. But since then, it's been years. The last thing we got from Dragon Quest was the spin-off Dragon Quest Monsters: The Dark Prince in 2023. And while that is a great game in itself, it is just a spin-off and not a main entry. It seems like a new mainline entry is almost like it's in an infinite purgatory. They announced Dragon Quest XII in 2021, and that was exciting. We got a new logo, a new tone, maybe even a darker direction for the series. It felt like something huge was coming. But now, 4 years later, we've barely heard anything. There's not even a trailer. There's no gameplay. We don't even have screenshots of the game. All we have so far is an updated logo. It really makes me wonder why they're holding off on it. And the thing is, sure, Dragon Quest fans are used to waiting, especially in the West. There was a point where we were always panicked, wondering if a Dragon Quest game would get localized. Sure, we got Dragon Quest 1 to 4, but then we didn't get 5, we didn't get 6. 7 seemed to be released without anyone knowing about it, and it really didn't get any eyes on it until Dragon Quest 8. These days, it's changed a bit, and it has become far more popular than it once was, but even so, there's this vague sense that maybe it's in trouble. That Square Enix is rethinking things behind the scenes. I've heard talks even about it abandoning its roots and turning into an action RPG series. Honestly, that frightens me, especially because Dragon Quest is the one series that always sticks to what it's been. It's not hard to wonder what's going on when a series this iconic just quietly vanishes from conversations. Yeah, we did recently get the amazing Dragon Quest III HD 2D remake, which was a crazy success for Square Enix, one of their best-selling games of 2024, and then we have Dragon Quest 1 and 2 HD 2D on the horizon, which I'm genuinely looking forward to, but those are remakes. And for a while now, it feels like we've just been circling the past, with ports, re-releases, mobile spin-offs, instead of moving forward with the series and giving us a new entry. And I get it, Dragon Quest has always been slow and steady, that's kind of the charm. But with so many years since the last new game, and nothing concrete about 12, it's starting to feel less like patience and more like uncertainty. And I don't want to feel that way about Dragon Quest. This series has always been a steady hand in a chaotic genre. It's not flashy, it's not trying to reinvent itself to be the next best thing, it's just sincere. Simple in the best ways. It gives you a sword, cute little slimes to fight, and tells you to go save the world, and for the most part, that's the entire premise of Dragon Quest. With all this being said, I'll keep waiting. I always do. But I think it's okay to admit that this silence about Dragon Quest is starting to speak up, and it just makes me scared about what's going to happen with the series. Breath of Fire was never the biggest JRPG series. It wasn't a headliner like Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest, but for some of us, it didn't need to be. It was just ours. For me, it started with Breath of Fire 3. I'd heard a ton about this game, but I didn't ever really get into it. After I got addicted to JRPGs with Wild Arms 2, this was one of the games I rented. I didn't know what I was doing. I probably wasn't even properly leveled, but I was having a good time, especially with the fishing. I spent way more time fishing in that game than anybody should. In fact, thinking about it now, that's probably why I love fishing minigames so much. While we're on the topic, do you have a favorite type of RPG minigame? Let me know in the comments below. The Breath of Fire world had this weird, quiet sadness to it. Bright colors, charming sprites, catchy music, but underneath there was always this quiet, dark feeling. Broken people, scarred towns, old gods that seemed to just ignore everyone. And yet somehow there was always this very faint sense of hope. It was always about surviving, even if you didn't win in the traditional sense. The Breath of Fire series didn't chase trends, it kind of had its own rhythm. Slow, reflective, a little strange. Breath of Fire 4 built on that with its almost mythic tone. And then Dragon Quarter came along and broke everything in half, but in a way that kind of worked. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me on that. I like the game, but some people not a fan. Dragon Quarter was bold, messy, uncomfortable, but looking back at it, I respect it a lot more now than I did when I first played it. But after that, we had nothing. After Dragon Quarter in 2002, we didn't hear anything for over a decade. Then Breath of Fire 6 came out in 2016, but it was a mobile gacha game. Japan only, online only, and the servers for it shut down within a year. It barely even felt like a real entry, and ever since then, the silence has been completely non-existent. And ever since then, the whole series has been dead silent. Capcom very rarely mentions it anymore. You see Mega Man, Street Fighter, or even deep cut stuff like Okami still getting loving collections or cameos, but Breath of Fire is just gone. Though recently we did get a modern day re-release of the PC port of Breath of Fire 4 on Good Old Games, or GOG. Speaking of which, go support that. It's $10 and it'll show Capcom that there's still interest in this series. You want a new Breath of Fire entry? This is the way to get it. But anyways, let's continue on. I don't know why it hurts so much that Breath of Fire has just disappeared, but it does. Because this was a series that meant a lot to people who didn't always see themselves in the flashier RPGs. It had quiet protagonists, it had weird systems, stories that were more than about sacrifice and victory. It had you just sit with less than happy endings and process that feeling that you won, but did you really win? Or did you just come out slightly above the opposition? There's still part of me that hopes that Capcom will do something, even if it's just a remaster, a collection, something to say, hey, we remember this too. But right now, it feels like Breath of Fire is one of those stories that the world just forgot to finish telling. And maybe that's what makes it stick with me. It never really ended, it just kind of stopped. And I don't think I've ever stopped waiting for more Breath of Fire because it's just one of those series that stands out above all the other ones that we have available. Blue Dragon always felt like it was meant to be the beginning of something bigger. It had that energy, the kind of first entry feeling that promises that there's more to come. You had Sakaguchi writing, Toriyama drawing, Uematsu composing. It felt like a dream team trying to bring back that classic JRPG magic for a new era, like a certain other game that we'll talk about later. Wink wink, nudge nudge. And for me, back in 2007, Blue Dragon worked. I remember booting it up on my Xbox 360 and being surprised by how traditional it felt. Turn-based battles, a huge colorful world, kids with mysterious powers. It hit all the notes I missed from future games. Almost like an Earthbound type feeling. It wasn't perfect, but it's really a hard concept to get, like warm almost. It's familiar, and there was really something comforting about it. The combat was absolutely snappy. The music was bold, sometimes weird, but unforgettable. Remember the boss theme? It's incredibly cringy, but also it's something I'll never forget. Then there's the whole idea of using your shadow as a weapon. It was honestly super awesome. Blue Dragon didn't reinvent the genre, but it felt like a love letter to it. And for Xbox players, it was a rare treat. One of the only JRPGs on the system at the time. Yeah, the Xbox did eventually get a few others like Lost Odyssey, Star Ocean 4, and Infinite Undiscovery, but at the time, Blue Dragon was one of the only JRPGs on the system. And there was a moment where it seemed like Blue Dragon might actually become much bigger than it was. We got 2 follow-up games on the Nintendo DS, Blue Dragon Plus, which continued the story with a new strategy-style battle system, and Awakened Shadow, which let you create your own character and fight in real time in an action RPG. They were fine, not bad, not amazing, but they were interesting, and they showed that someone, somewhere, wanted to keep the world of Blue Dragon going. But after those 2 DS games and the anime, there really wasn't anything. No console sequel, no HD remaster, no Steam release, not even a mention in anniversary roundups. It's just gone. There is demand for it. Can't even count how many times I've seen people demand a PC port of this and other Xbox 360 exclusive JRPGs, and I think that's what makes it hurt a little. Not that it failed, because it didn't. It sold well enough. People still remember it fondly, but instead of building on it, they just sort of let it go. Like it never quite fit anywhere and nobody wanted to push it further. And now it's hard to even play. Unless you've got an old Xbox 360 sitting around or an Xbox Series console, along with the original discs or a digital download, it's just sitting in the past. There's no way to revisit it. No real sign it'll ever come back. In fact, it's been said numerous times by Sakaguchi of Mistwalker that he has no interest in porting it to modern hardware. I still think about it sometimes. The kids, the shadows, the boss fights with Uematsu's screaming guitars. It was weird, and sometimes clunky, but it was great. And I really believed back then that it was the start of something new that would stick around. Turns out it was just a brief moment. A flicker, but a moment that I'm still glad that I caught. I only started playing Lufia last year, and I actually began with the very first game. Just gonna mention, I actually do have reviews for 1 and 2 on the channel, so maybe you want to check that out after you're done here. So I started with Lufia and the Fortress of Doom. Going in, I didn't know much about the series except that the second game, Lufia 2 Rise of the Sinistrals, was supposed to be the real highlight. I had heard this hundreds of times from one of my very best friends, and he would not shut up about Lufia 2. So I, being myself, was like, okay, I'll play the first one, then jump into the second, because, that's how I am. I have to play them in release order. Fortress of Doom felt pretty rough around the edges. The gameplay was simple, and some parts of it felt a bit dated. Namely, the combat system, where you had to manually retarget if you killed an enemy, as well as the insane amount of fetch quests. But there was something charming about it. The story about heroes fighting the Sinistrals, these godlike villains threatening the world, drew me in enough to keep me going. When I moved on to Lufia 2, it was a whole different experience. Released back in 1995, this game felt deeper. It felt smarter, and it was way more emotional. The puzzles of Lufia 2 are a highlight. They're clever. The combat was way more strategic with its IP skill system, and the characters actually felt more realistic. Even knowing it was a prequel made the story hit harder, especially when looking back at the original and you know how it's going to end. After finishing those two classics, I was excited to find out what happened next. There were a couple of spin-offs, like Lufia the Legend Returns on Game Boy Color and Lufia the Ruins of Lore on Game Boy Advance. I haven't played these games yet. I plan on it soon, but I hear they aren't all that great. After how much I love the second game, I'm curious to where they took the series. However, I have played the final game in the series, Lufia Curse of the Sinistrals, released on the Nintendo DS in 2010. What a piece of garbage. I had high hopes for it, thinking it might be a faithful remake of Lufia 2, or at least a serviceable successor. Instead, it completely changed the formula. The turn-based RPG I loved became the soulless action RPG with a much lighter, more comedic tone. The pacing felt rushed, and the story lost much of its emotional weight. It didn't feel like the Lufia I fell for. The gameplay suffered bad, and it's an embarrassment to the franchise. And I'm not surprised the series crashed and burned after it. Seriously, it's like Lunar Dragon Song levels of bad. Don't even look up gameplay of it, it's awful. Don't subject yourself to that crap. Anyways, enough of that. But since Curse of the Sinistral dropped over a decade ago, we haven't seen a new Lufia game. No remasters, no re-releases, no news about reviving the series at all. It's like it quietly disappeared, leaving fans with only those old cartridges and those old memories. Starting the series late gave me a fresh appreciation for what Lufia offered, but it also left me feeling a bit sad. There's so much potential there, the characters, the puzzles, the story, but it's all been left untouched for years now. I still hope that one day Lufia will get a proper revival. Until then, I'm grateful for the first two games, even if I found them a little too late. I started playing Golden Sun fairly recently, and it quickly became one of those series I wish I had discovered earlier. The first two games on the Game Boy Advance, Golden Sun and Golden Sun The Lost Age, felt like complete worlds full of magic, mystery, and clever puzzles. The way the games use synergy, not just in battle, but to interact with the environment was something I hadn't ever seen before. The story was simple, the characters, they were goofy, the music, it still sticks with me. Some of Motoi Sakuraba's best work, especially Isaac's battle theme. I love it so much. But after those two games, the series kind of went dark. In 2010, Golden Sun Dark Dawn came out on the Nintendo DS. It was set years later and tried to continue the franchise, but it didn't quite capture the same spark. I hear it also ends on an unresolved cliffhanger, and it made the fanbase incredibly angry, since we didn't get a successor to close off the story. Personally, I haven't quite played through it yet. I want to though, I just haven't had the time to get to it. Since then, we haven't had anything. There's no new Golden Sun game, no remasters, no collections. There's not even a spiritual successor. The closest thing we've gotten is the release of the first two games on the Nintendo Switch Online. There have been no hints or teases that the series will ever come back. It's been over a decade. More than a freaking decade, without any new entries. For a series that once felt like it could be a mainstay in the JRPG world, it's hard to believe that this happened. The silence is really hard to swallow. It's strange to love a series that feels so complete, yet also so frozen in time. The world of Wayard still feels alive in my mind, but the games themselves have been left behind, buried beneath years of newer releases and reboots from other franchises. I get that game development moves fast and that trends change, but when a series like Golden Sun, with its beautiful storytelling, its unique gameplay, and loyal fans, gets left on the shelf for so long, it makes you wonder if it'll ever get another chance. I keep hoping, because the magic of Golden Sun isn't just nostalgia. At least not for me, because I didn't play until recently, but it feels like something meaningful even today. It deserves to come back, not just as a memory, but something new, alive, ready to be explored by a new generation. Until then, I'll hold on to those first two games in the world they created, quietly wishing that they weren't the last. Wild Arms has been a part of my gaming journey for a very long time. In fact, Wild Arms 2 was one of the first JRPGs I ever played, and it made a huge impression on me. I even covered my experience with it in a previous video, sharing how that game shaped my love for the genre. The mix of dusty western landscapes, turn-based battles, and an emotional story just clicked in a way few games did at the time. The original Wild Arms and its sequels on PlayStation have this unique charm. They blend classic JRPG mechanics with a Wild West aesthetic, and the world feels full of quiet mysteries, ancient ruins, and haunting music. That blend of fantasy and grit is something that stuck with me. The characters can be a little rough around the edges, but their stories are deep. Themes of hope, survival, and sacrifice, and harsh landscapes just all blend together so perfectly. These aren't flashy games, they're just consistent with one another, offering a unique experience, telling their stories in a subtle but meaningful way. After Wild Arms 5 released in 2006, though, the series slowed down. That game introduced a new cast and some fresh ideas. It fixed all the problems that people had with Wild Arms 4 and was a shout out to longtime fans of the series. I feel like this might have contributed to where it went wrong and kind of killed the series. Releasing a game to cater to longtime fans of the series probably wasn't the smartest thing to do for a series that wasn't the most popular. Then in 2007 came Wild Arms XF, the latest entry so far, if we don't count the mobile gacha title, Million Memories. This was a turn-based tactical RPG, a pretty big departure from the classic style. While it took place in the Wild Arms universe and carried some familiar themes, it felt different, more distant from the emotional core I loved. It reminded me that while the series isn't forgotten, it's no longer the same. Thankfully, there's hope on the horizon. Armed Fantasia is a spiritual successor made by some of the original Wild Arms creators. It promised to bring back that classic JRPG feel with fresh ideas and storytelling, a true homage to what made the series special. For longtime fans like me, it's a light shining in the distance. Looking back, my journey with Wild Arms is a mix of nostalgia and bittersweet waiting. I'm grateful that Wild Arms 2 was one of my first JRPGs. It shaped so much of how I see the genre. And though the series has been quiet lately, the stories and music still echo, reminding me why I fell in love with these games in the first place. And with that being said, I actually did rank every Wild Arms game from worst to best. So if you love the Wild Arms series, maybe check that out after you're done here. This is the final entry on our list, and it's one that holds a special place in JRPG history, the Chrono series. I first played Chrono Trigger years ago on the Final Fantasy Chronicles collection with Final Fantasy IV, and honestly, it was like discovering a hidden treasure. The story of friends traveling through time to save their world felt fresh and magical. The characters were vibrant and memorable. The battle system was engaging, and the soundtrack, composed by Yasunori Mitsuda and Nobuo Uematsu, still gives me chills every time I hear it. I love it so much. It's no wonder Chrono Trigger is often called one of the greatest JRPGs ever made. But then came Chrono Cross, the sequel that took a very different turn. To be honest, Chrono Cross landed on my worst JRPGs of all time list, and while I respect its ambition and the unique ideas it brought to the table, like a sprawling cast, a complex story about parallel worlds, it never clicked for me. Not at all. I do not like it. Not one bit. The narrative was confusing. The characters, they felt kind of distant and undeveloped. And the battle system, well, interesting. It was just overly complicated. The story lacked the emotional punch of its predecessor. It was frustrating, especially after experiencing the brilliance that was Chrono Trigger. Despite that, Chrono Cross still holds an important place in the series' legacy, showing the risks that developers were willing to take to expand their world. But after 1999, when Chrono Cross was released, the series went completely silent. There have been no new mainline games, no remakes beyond simple ports, and no clear sign of any future projects. That silence is kind of hard to accept. It feels like the story was paused indefinitely, leaving fans wondering what could have been. Chrono Trigger is probably one of the most demanded games by fans to get the HD 2D treatment. I'm not sure why it hasn't happened yet at this point. It seems like the most obvious choice. But I'm not Square Enix, so I don't know how they come up with these decisions. I often find myself returning to Chrono Trigger, revisiting its world, its music, and reminding myself of why it captured everybody's hearts and turned thousands upon thousands of people into JRPG fans. It's a timeless experience that, despite its age, puns, Chrono Trigger never loses its magic. It's a game that defines what JRPGs can be at their best. The Chrono series as a whole feels frozen in time, a paradox fitting for a series about time travel, and maybe in a way that's kind of part of its charm. The games themselves have been timeless moments we cherish, stories we keep close even if they never continue. As much as I'm disappointed by the lack of new Chrono games, I'm also grateful for what we have. These two games, the brilliance of Chrono Trigger and the ambition of Chrono Cross, left an indelible mark on the genre and on me personally. And maybe that's enough for now. For fans like me, the hope lingers quietly that someday, somehow, the clock will start ticking again and we'll get to experience a new chapter in the Chrono Saga. So there you have it. There are several franchises that have been just forgotten over the years. And while it's been great revisiting these classics and thinking about the potential they still have, I'd love to hear what franchises you think have been abandoned and deserve a comeback. Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video, a like is definitely appreciated, and for more JRPG content, consider subscribing. It's the best way to support the channel so I can keep talking JRPGs week after week. This has been Shinky, thanks so much for watching, and as always, have a wonderful day.